Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started. My name is Angela. I'm gonna be attending USC in the fall, possibly majoring in cognitive science or pre-med. Today we're gonna have two presentations. So first we're gonna begin with Shevanti and Nava talking about the different kinds of application portals, and then we're gonna pass it off to Chloe and Emily, who are gonna talk about college essay advice. Now I'm gonna pass it off to Anne.
Hi, my name is Anne. I'll be attending Baylor this fall as a nursing major. So just for a quick preview of the presentations today, you guys can ask questions through the chat through all the presentations, and at the end we'll have a live Q&A so you guys can unmute yourselves and ask the host the questions verbally. But if anything, if you're not comfortable, you can always message us privately. And so now I'll be passing it on to Lauren.
Hi guys, my name is Lauren and I'll be attending UC Irvine this fall as a criminology and law major. And I just want to start off by thanking you all for taking time out of your day to attend this Zoom session. To fulfill our commitment as an educational platform, we will continue to host Zoom meetings throughout this week. However, in light of recent events, I also hope that you are all taking time to continue educating yourselves and your peers about the more important matters that's happening in society today. With that being said, I'm now going to pass it on to Nava and Shevanti with their presentation.
Hi everyone, so welcome again. This first presentation, we are going to be talking about the various types of application portals that you will be using with your application process. These portals are where you will be uploading your personal information and different types of essays to different schools. So we hope to get you a little more familiar with these different portals. So hi again, my name is Nava. I will be attending UC Davis in the fall studying cognitive science with a computational emphasis, big words. You can reach me at these handles if you have any questions or anything you want to talk to me about personally.
Hi guys, I'm Shevanti. I'm going to be attending UCLA this fall as a computational and systems biology major on the pre-med track. And you can reach me through Instagram and Facebook Messenger, and my handles are on the screen.
So as Anne said before, feel free to ask questions in the chat as we go along. Anne will be answering them as we go, and for some of them, we will be answering them at the end. So feel free to ask questions as we go through this presentation. So to start off, let's go over the four main different application portals you will be using in your process. So the first application portal is the CSU application for California State Universities only, if this includes 23 campuses. For the University of California application, there are two different things. This includes 9 different schools, UC schools you can apply to. The Common App, as stated in the name, will be the most widely used application portal. It includes pretty much all other schools, except for some that focus on the Coalition App. It's a little less common, but it's still used by many schools, and it's important that you get familiar with it. So to start off, we'll be starting with the California State University applications. In this application, you will be required to complete 4 main sections, which include personal information, academic history, supporting information, and different program materials. In the personal information section, you'll be filling out everything listed in this blue screenshot here. It's information about your family, background, and other easy to answer questions that you already know. For the academic history section, you'll be completing these tabs in this screenshot over here. They are requiring a lot more self-reporting, so I highly recommend that when you are completing this, you have your transcripts and your grades and your standardized testing scores written out somewhere or readily available so you have an easy place to reference them at. And it's very important that you answer these honestly, because if you do get admitted, you will have to report the official scores, and if you lie, that isn't going to end out very well. For the supporting information section, that's just one question related to the CSU schools and some educational programs that they offer. And for the program materials, this is where you are going to be putting which schools, which CSU campuses you want to apply to, and for which major at each of those schools you will be applying to. Something about the CSU application that is different than a lot of different other applications is that it opens on October 1st and is due on November 30th. It's important that you apply as early as you can. I put everything aside on October 1st and I completed this within the first 2 days because one of the schools had some technical difficulties that I couldn't complete on October 1st. But again, the earlier you apply, the better. And it's the easiest application. You're just filling out basic information you already know about yourself, and there's no essays and no recommendations needed. This is depending on which schools you apply to, though. For some programs, I believe there are some nursing programs in some schools that require you to have some essays and transcripts or recommendations available for them to look at. So make sure you do your research on which schools and which majors you'll be applying to before getting into it.
So the next application we're going to be talking about is the UC application. Next slide. So through the UC application portal, you can apply to as many of the 9 campuses as you want. Something to keep in mind is you don't have to apply to all the campuses. And while you're applying through the portal, you get to choose which campuses you want to specifically apply to. So on the slide, you can see a screenshot of how your portal will look like and all the components of the application. Nava, can you go to the next slide? So the first important section is colleges and majors. So in this section, you're basically going to be choosing which colleges you want to apply to and the major you want to apply to those colleges with. And most colleges also allow you to pick an alternate major, which is basically like a second choice. And something to keep in mind is that UC San Diego makes you rank their 7 colleges. And on the screen, you can see a link that will be helpful for you to decide how you want to rank your colleges. So just make sure you research each college individually to know how to rank them, because they will be important, because when you apply to UCSD and if you end up getting in, you're going to be admitted to the college based off of how you rank it. And it's very hard to change colleges. So it's important that you rank it based off of your preferences. And another thing to keep in mind is that a lot of people think that if you apply to an easy major, then it increases your chances of getting into a certain college. However, this is mostly false, because most of the time you're going to be applying to the college rather than the specific major. So applying as an English major or a biology major is the same thing, because it's all in the College of Letters and Sciences. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, but can you go back to the previous slide? So the next section is going to be academic history. And this is where you're going to be self-reporting your grades from 9th to 12th grade, as well as any community college classes that you took. Like Nava was saying, it's easier if you have your transcript with you, so you can quickly fill out this section. And something important to keep in mind is that while you're filling this out, the UC application portal will be calculating your UC GPA, and UC GPA only accounts for 10th and your 10th and 11th grade grades, and it's going to be weighted. So your AP classes will be weighted. And additionally, community college classes boost your UC GPA, so it's beneficial to take them in the summer if you have time. The next section is test scores, and this is where you're going to be submitting your SAT, ACT, SAT subject, and AP test scores. And UCs require that you send official test reports. So you're going to be doing that through College Board, and you only need to send it to one of the UC campuses, and the rest of them will get it. Another thing that's important is that UCs do not super score, so you have to send your best composite score for the ACT and SAT. The next important section is activities and awards. And here you'll be given 20 spots for inputting your activities and awards. A helpful tip on how to fill out this section is to first write a full resume of all the activities you've done in your high school career, and rank them according to what you think is the most important to something that you think is less significant. And once you have a full resume, then you'll be able to fill out those 20 boxes. And they give you 5 categories, and you basically categorize all of your extracurriculars into these 5. There are educational preparation programs, volunteer and community service, work experience, awards and honors, and extracurricular activities. And something to keep in mind is that quality is way more important than quantity. So don't worry if you can't fill out all of the 20 slots that are given to you, because admission officers are looking at the quality of those extracurriculars more than how many you fill out. But try to fill out as many as possible. And additionally, if you put a work experience in your UC application, it asks you what you did with the money that you earned. So make sure you have a good response to that. And you have 500 characters of space to describe each of the activities you add onto your application. And after you describe your activity with those 500 characters, you'll be asked to state what grade levels you participated in that activity and your time commitment for that activity. And the last section are the personal insight questions. And the UCs will release 8 prompts in August, and you will have to respond to 4 of those prompts in an essay. And you're going to be writing 350-word essays. And Chloe and Emily will get into more in depth with this on what the prompts look like and how you can approach these essays. So some unique aspects of the UC application are that there's no teacher recommendation required, and there's no long personal statement essay like in the Common App or Coalition app. And it's also due earlier. As you can see on the screen, it's due November 30th, but I highly recommend that you turn it in earlier, because most of the time the site crashes on November 30th or November 29th, so it's better if you get it in earlier.
The next portal we will be discussing is the Common Application. Again, as I said before, this is going to be the application portal you most likely will be using the most. It is highly recommended that you don't just apply to the UCs or the CSUs and expand the schools that you apply to. So you will be using the Common Application in one way or another. There are 2 main tabs on the portal which you will be using the most, the Common App tab and the My Colleges tab. So on the Common App tab, you will be putting most of your own personal information, similar to what I was saying in the CSU section, and a lot of the questions you'll be filling out in the UC application as well. So it's your profile, family, education, testing, activities, writing, and some schools will require you to self-report your courses and your grades. So this is going to be probably the first thing you do when you make your application account. It's easy to get out of the way, and it'll be the same thing you submit for each of the schools. For the activities list, I will be getting into that a little bit later when we go into some resources that will be easy for you to organize all of this stuff out. It's one of the hardest things that students have to do. It's because you get 150 characters to discuss each activity you take part in. I'll be discussing that a little bit more later. For the writing section, you will have a personal statement, which you'll be submitting to all of the schools that you apply to. It's a 650-word essay where you can pretty much write about anything that you feel defines you as a person, or shows something you learned, or shows personal growth. Now, for each school individually, if we look at the My Colleges tab, this is an example of some of the schools that I put in my dashboard when I was applying to college. So for example, University of Southern California has pretty much all of the components that most schools ask for. So you have the application section. The questions are some specific questions similar to the personal information questions that you will be answering, but more specific to what the university is asking you for. For recommenders and FERPA, this is where you will be inviting your counselor to put in your courses and your grades, the official transcripts of them, counselor recommendations, and where you will be putting your teacher recommendations as well. You get to put them in through this section here. It's very important that you get ahead of this as soon as you can. So if you have the chance, email as many teachers as you can currently, so that you have, when you go back to school, hopefully in September, you will have teachers that will be able to write your recommendation essays for you. For review and submit Common App, this is where you will be submitting only this section. So when you are submitting your essays, when you're submitting your application for each school, make sure that you submit this section and this section in order to complete the application, because there are two different sections you need to complete. For example, for me, actually for USC, I didn't submit the writing supplement because I completely forgot about it until the next day. So make sure you get ahead of that and don't make the same mistake that I made. Now, the writing supplement section, this is different for each school. They have different amounts of essays, different lengths of essays, and they ask different types of questions. Some schools will ask you pretty superficial questions like, what's your favorite book? Or things like that, like how do you like to spend your time? Others will ask you more specific things to maybe your career path and other things like that. So yeah, make sure you submit them both. And then some schools will also ask you for a portfolio if you're applying to something like the arts or anything related to something they need to have evidence that you have like experience in. You'll be submitting that in their portfolio section if that's required for them. For the activities list, here I have provided my own example of what I submitted to all of the schools. So the activities list, you get 10 activities where you can describe things that you participated in high school from 1 to 10. So it's highly recommended that you put them in order of what you think was most impactful and what you spent most of your time in. So for me, that was ASB. For the first section, it says position, leadership description, and organization name if applicable. So I put high school ASB president. It has the organization name and the highest position that I was a part of. Then you put in the grade levels that you participated in, whether or not it was in the school, this time of the school year, summer break, or year round, and then how many hours per week, how many weeks per year, and whether or not you would like to participate in college. This question might not seem that important, but this shows that if you do put yes for participating in college, this shows that you like to put commitment towards the things that you participate in and you're not just doing them for the college applications. And then for the describe the activity in 150 characters, you can read what I put here. In no way is this a grammatically correct couple of sentences. They're not expecting you to put a beautiful, like Shakespeare written sentence in 150 characters. Just put in your best words the amount, like, put in your best words what you think the most important things that you contributed to this activity were. And then if you're doing this on a Google Doc, this is something useful to keep in mind. If you put Shift Command C, it'll show you how many characters you actually have. So for this one, it was 149 characters. I could have added another one, but it's not necessary.
Okay, so the last application we're going to be talking about is the coalition application. So the coalition application portal is very similar to the Common App. The main difference is that the personal statement essay is shorter. It's only 500 to 550 words, while the Common App essay is 650 words. The majority of the Common App essay prompts are similar to one or more of the coalition prompts. So most likely you'll be able to reuse the same essay and shorten it before submitting it onto your coalition portal. And everything else is very similar to what Nava was saying. In the coalition portal, you'll have an option to let counselors upload transcripts as well as teachers to upload recommendations. And you'll also be self-reporting your SAT and ACT scores. And if a college wants an official score report, then you're gonna have to send it through College Board. Otherwise, the coalition application portal allows you to self-report all of these scores. And similar to the common application portal, you have 8 activities and experience boxes, and you have 150 characters to describe them. And so there are some schools that have their own individual portals, for example, MIT and Georgetown, and these are very similar to the Common App portal. So if you have any specific questions, then you can message Nava or me. Otherwise, it's very intuitive and very similar to what we've been going over. Nava's going to show you guys a sample college app folder that she used now.
So we created this resource for you guys. It is going to be available for you at the end of College Advice Week. It includes pretty much everything you're going to need to keep your application process as organized as possible, because we really highly recommend that you don't only work on your college applications through the application portals, because sometimes things won't be saved. and you want to be able to make changes really easily. And Google Drive is something we're all pretty used to using, so it's a very helpful tool. So for example, if you had something for the common application, you would put it in here, and like you would put maybe a folder titled Stanford, and that's the school you're applying to, and you put all of your essays in there. For the folder itself, we created a guide, and this shows you how you can use each resource that we've put in here. Some of the main ones are the activities list. This makes it very easy to narrow everything down and keep everything organized before you paste it onto your application portal. So again, over here, you put everything for the common activities list, and answer all of these questions, and you can count how many characters you have and fix them and narrow them down as you go, and again, put them in order of importance 1 through 10. And then there's also an honors list where you can put different like titles and recognitions that you've received. Shevanti, do you know anything more about the honors list? I didn't really use this when I was applying.
I think it's very similar to the activities. You have the same number of characters to describe it.
Yeah. And then the UC activities list, this one's a little bit more bulky. On the bottom, there are different tabs. As Shevanti was saying earlier, there are different categories where you can organize your activities. So awards or honors, educational prep programs, extracurricular activities, other coursework, volunteer work, and work experience. And something you may have noticed as I was going through each tab is the questions for each are different. You get 500 characters for pretty much each one, but you get different questions that are specific to the category which these activities fall under. So organizing these might be the easiest way to get that done. Another useful resource is this master sheet. This is where you can put all of your main research. If you have a game plan of like things you want to get done each week, this is the main part where you can do your research here. For admissions, like the different things like at the end, that's not to worry about now. And then this is a brainstorming tool I really wanted to get to. So as said earlier, when you are putting, when you're trying to think of different ideas of things that you want to talk about for yourself, or the different extracurricular activities you want to put in, this is like a great way to remember everything you probably have done in your high school experience. So different adjectives you think describe you, extracurriculars you were a part of, powerful moments you remember experiencing, different values that are important to you, your morals, interests and hobbies, and etc. So I put different examples. Something that's left out a lot is taking care of siblings. I remember my college counselor talked about this with me. Like there are a lot of things that you would expect fit the ideal college activities list, but there are some things that take up your time and that you invest a lot of time in, that you learn a lot from, that don't fit these typical things. For example, like DECA. DECA is a typical thing that a lot of people are going to put in their applications, but taking care of your siblings, that's an at-home responsibility that you had to put in hours in, and it might explain why you might not have had enough time to study for that test and that really brought your grade down. So these are the important things to think about when you're creating your activities list. And with that, we have completed our side of the presentation, and I'll hand it off to Chloe and Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm going to be talking about, or we're going to be talking about college essay content with Chloe today. So I'm going to be attending Carnegie Mellon University this fall in their School of Design, and you can be contacting me on Instagram at this handle, or messaging me on Facebook Messenger.
And hi, I'm Chloe. I'm going to be attending UCLA in the fall, hopefully, and I'm going to be majoring in psychobiology. It's a combination of psychology and biochemistry. And I'm also intending to pursue a pre-med track, and you can message me or DM me at any time in my Instagram handle. So this is just some general advice that we're going to start off with. And I'm going to be talking about how you're supposed to write your application. So if you've taken APENG or AP Literature before, your teacher has probably told you, write about literature in the present tense because literature is alive. And this rule also applies for when you're writing your college applications, when you're writing about the life experiences that you want to tell the admissions officers. Don't be afraid to use I words because this is about you. You can definitely put yourself in the positive light, but also don't brag because it reflects badly on college admissions. And you can see on the right that I have two pictures, or two different types of text that are rearranged differently. So on the left with a thumbs down, it's this huge block of text that's really difficult to read. There's only a beginning and an end. And that you don't want to do that because it's like hitting an admissions officer in the face with a huge block of text. But on the right with the thumbs up, you can see that the paragraphs are broken up creatively. So you can showcase transitions. You can showcase transitions more clearly, and then you can create more emphasis with line breaks or paragraph breaks. You also definitely want to make transitions obvious, and Emily and I will talk about how you can section your essay so that it reflects best on your life experience. And you also want to utilize an inverse funnel. And what this means is that you start with the problem that you have, you start with yourself, and you start with a personalization. And then at the end, you want to self-reflect and see how this can open up to the rest of the world.
So in terms of general advice on what to write or what not to write, you'll always hear to avoid the 3Ds, which stands for death, divorce, and depression. But I'll talk a little bit more about this later. Also, I would say don't be afraid to be out of the box or funny, because these admissions officers will definitely be reading like tens and tens of essays every day, and going out of the box or being funny will only really help you. In terms of word count, always start your essay not being afraid. Don't really like fear the word count. I would say that it's better to go over word count than try to constantly stay under it, because when you go over it, you can at least go back and analyze and re-edit your essay, take out the parts that are not as powerful. In terms of reusing essays, you'll definitely be finding yourself reusing essays. For example, supplements for like the why this school essay. Like you can basically take like why NYU and use it as why Columbia, but just like switch up the names of the professors or switch up like the names of classes and stuff like that. But just keep in mind that when you're reusing essays, sometimes it's also quite obvious when they're like butchered together. So this is like when you take like half of one essay and then half of another one and you put it together. Sometimes if you don't like really edit it, it doesn't really seem that seamless. So definitely when you're reusing essays, be putting in that time to like make it its own again. And then my last piece of advice is to answer the prompt, but then also like really answer the prompt. And by this, I mean that you should know like how to really break down a prompt, what a prompt is like really trying to ask you, and how much of your essay that you want to spend talking about different parts of it. And Chloe and I will be breaking down all of the UC and Common App prompts later on this presentation. But in terms of what not to write, I just want to say that like the rules really aren't, the rules exist, but they're like, you don't really have to hold yourself to them too harshly. So you can write about 3Ds, but just don't make it like seem like a sob story. And also just don't make it seem like a story, period. Like don't just try to write a narrative of exactly what happened. Truly spend time to like analyze it and connect it to further aspects of life. So an example I can think of right now is like if you're writing about divorce, don't write a super descriptive narrative or story of exactly how the divorce went. So for example, this could be like different love languages, or like how you value your own relationships. So bring like something further out of just writing a story. And personally, like I give you this advice, but I like wrote about 2 of the 3Ds for my essays that worked. And then for another essay, I wrote like 280 words for like a 500 word count prompt. So and it all turned out okay. So like definitely don't stick too harshly to this. Next slide. So in terms of how to choose the prompt, this is especially relevant for Common App because they're going to give you 7 prompts and you can only choose to answer 1 of them. So I would say to, you could try to first write your like general story and then fit it into a prompt. And when you first see the list of prompts, most of the time, a certain one would like immediately speak out to you. But this prompt may also reveal that you just want to tell like the obvious story that's already there. So kind of ask yourself which prompt pushes you to think deeper about yourself, because you can be telling the same life story and the same content, but answering it in the context of a more interesting question that makes you like learn more about yourself might be more powerful. And then I would also say that the perfect prompt is going to be the perfect balance of both ease and challenging to write.
So I'd like you guys to read this sentence and then you read it again and then read it a third time, because I've had way too many juniors come to me like crying because they think that their life experiences aren't worth writing about in your college essays. Like, what are you saying to me? Okay, you cannot say that. If you have nothing to write about, trust me, you do. Things that you, like what Nava said a few minutes ago, things that you think aren't special to anybody else, they actually are special to you. So this is the time that you can take to introspect, but don't fall into that dark hole thinking that you have nothing to write about, because you do. And personally for me, I had to write 4 essays for UC applications, and I was missing an essay a month before applications were due. And what I did is something ended up happening to me a month before UC apps were due, and that's what I wrote about. So really, if you want to ask me more about this, and if you want me to like boost your self-esteem, I really will. Like, please message me, because I know what it's like to think that you have nothing to write about. So I got you. And now we're going to be talking more technically. And I'll be talking about the UC application. Like Emily said, there are 8 different prompts to choose from. However, you only choose 4 to talk about. And the word count might seem really scary. 350 words is not a lot. And it's going to be difficult to fit a life experience, something that like really changed you and impacted you and is a essential part and crucial part of your identity, into 350 words. But trust me, you got this. Okay, so what I did in the beginning of the UC application is I looked at the 8 different prompts and I realized that they fall under 3 different categories. And my main advice is that you should write at least 1 essay in each of the 3 categories, so you'll have an extra one to use for emphasis in a specific category that you think that you excel in. So for the first one I want to talk about is leadership. And you can see that we have prompt 1 and prompt 7 on the screen. And the prompts, I'm not going to read it again, but it's in bold and italics. So for prompt 1, it's asking about your leadership experience in a group. And this can be a team of any kind. Don't be constrained down to a sports team or a debate team. It can be anything that you define as a team. And usually you want to talk about leadership positions that you've held and nurtured for a long time. So you want to show your commitment, you want to show your efforts towards this leadership position and how it's changed you and also changed other people. For prompt 7, it's asking specifically about your school and community. So the difference between prompt 1 and prompt 7 is prompt 7 is more specific and prompt 1 is more general. And again, community is not just your physical neighborhood, not just your geographical neighborhood, it's how you define it. My good friend Emily wrote about a Facebook group as a community that she made a better place, which is online. And again, we want to talk about sections. So when you section this prompt, you want to show that you're connected to this organization, right? Like, why are you involved in this organization in the first place? Who are you in it? But that's a very, very small part. And you want to present the problem. You want to establish it like you did for Change, for WHIP, for Quest, but that's only 10%. Then you want to focus more and shift towards your positive contributions. What did you do to alleviate this problem? And most importantly, include your reflection at the end. What happened because of you? What positive, impactful effects happened to this organization because of you? And for the second one, this is your time to show your uniqueness, like who you are and what separates you from the thousands of other applicants who are applying to the school. For prompt 2 on the top left, it's asking you about expressing your creative side. Definitely think outside of the box for this one. Creative doesn't just mean in terms of art, like it's what makes you different and other from everybody else around you. And Emily and I want to emphasize that usually how you express yourself is why you express yourself. So the why can be used as a reflection at the end of your essay. From prompt 3, it's asking about your greatest talent and skill. So a lot of you probably know this, but I've dedicated a large majority of my life to studying classical piano performance. And my extracurriculars that Nava and Shevanti talked about for awards and for honors, I wrote about the competitions that I participated in for piano. And I was going to write about piano as my greatest talent and skill, but I realized that the admissions offices already saw that it was a great talent of mine in my extracurriculars. So I didn't want to write about something obvious again, because I thought that it would take up space in my application that could be used for something else. So instead I added a twist. Instead of talking about like what competitions I participated in for piano, I talked about how my greatest talent and skill was teaching piano to little children. And I connected that to how I want to pursue medicine because I want to help little children and become a pediatrician. For prompt 6 on the bottom left, it's asking about an academic subject that you've furthered. For example, if you're into medicine, then you've probably volunteered at a hospital before. If you're into computer science, you've probably done Girls Who Code or anything like that. Don't be afraid to pursue a major that you have not done work in before. I'm pursuing a pre-med track, but I haven't volunteered in a hospital. I spent most of my time volunteering at church instead because that was what I wanted to do. And I know people who haven't done comp sci, haven't done comp sci work outside of nothing actually. They haven't done comp sci work before, but they chose to do comp sci in the future because that's what they wanted to be. That's what they wanted the career to be. Comp sci, pre-med, anything, law is something that you can learn. It's not something that you had to have done like a decade's worth of to get into a college in that particular major. So don't be afraid to embellish your work in the lab, in the hospital, but also don't be cliche and don't exaggerate. Please don't lie in your applications. And what the college is asking is, how will you continue this academic interest in the college that you're applying to and in your career in the future? And prompt 8 is a very ambiguous and vague prompt. It's going to give you a lot of freedom. It's asking, besides everything in your application, what truly makes you stand out? What do you think is essential? What is so essential to you that you need to tell to the college admissions offices? You can literally write about anything, and you can attest to your personal character or other experiences that really shaped you to become who you are. And for the last category, prompt 4 and 5 ask about challenges that you've overcome, because it's through like struggling and through obstacles that we grow as people. For prompt 4, it's asking specifically about an educational opportunity and how you took positive advantage of it, or how you've overcome an educational barrier. This doesn't have to be some like huge barrier. I'm gonna personally talk about what I wrote about. I am not Chinese, even though everybody at school thinks I'm Chinese. I'm Indonesian, and I'm fluent in Indonesian. But the language that I chose to take in high school was Chinese and Mandarin. And I would walk into Chinese 4 as a junior, and everybody else in the class would be a freshman, straight from China, and they were speaking so fluently and so beautifully. And I felt so awkward there, and I felt really judged. And I talked about how that was an educational barrier that I had to overcome, because being in Chinese class was difficult for me, but more than that, it made me hate my culture. It made me hate that Bahasa Indonesian wasn't something that I could use academically because nobody knew how to speak it. But in the end, I overcame it, because in the end, I realized that Bahasa was how I told my grandmother, I love you, even though Mandarin gives me college credit. And again, you want to section it. So the barrier, establish the barrier in the beginning, 30%. Focus on how you overcame it. What did you do? What did you feel? And then in the end, reflect on what you learned. And then for prompt 5, this is more broad. It's asking about the most significant challenge you faced and how you overcome it. But then you also want to tie this into your academic achievement. And the difference between prompt 4 and prompt 5 is that prompt 5 broadens to social, emotional, and mental challenges that you've experienced, anything that you think is important to you. And you want to also connect this to your academic achievement in the end. And now Emily will be talking about the Common App. I think he's frozen. Okay, there we go.
Sorry, I realized I was muted. Okay, so for the Common App, you have 7 prompts to choose from, and you can write between 250 to 650 words. But I would say to write like at least 500 words probably. And often people will use their UC prompts and just lengthen one of them to make a Common App, and vice versa. So someone could write their Common App first and then shorten it to be a UC prompt. Also keep in mind that unlike UC, you can submit different Common App essays to different colleges. So in between submissions, you can be like editing it, making it better, changing it up, write a completely different essay and submit it to a different college. And for Common App, you can like really write about anything. And to like give my own spiel about Chloe's point that like if you think you have nothing to write about, you honestly do. Like I wrote about like some of the weirdest things, like I wrote about like a dead animal I saw on the side of the road. I came home and I wrote an essay about it. That essay also got me to college. So like,
He actually did.
just like like a random person I saw on the bus. I wrote about that. And Common App is kind of, the Common App essay is kind of there to show like your personality, your values, who you are like deep down. And honestly, like the other supplements for these private schools that you're applying to will be the ones where you can like write about your extracurriculars or what you did. But Common App, you can like focus on anything you want, really. Next slide. So the first essay is the personal story. So this is prompt number 1. It's like there. But I think the most important part of this prompt is to figure out if this prompt is for you. And this prompt is for you if you believe that you have a truly compelling and unique life story, which actually all of us do have. But few teenagers are able to like really fully realize this, because like we all actually lived pretty average and similar lives at core, which is like in what I believe to be like the first slap in the face you get when you're completing college apps. You realize that, oh, I'm just like everyone else. Actually, there's nothing too special about me. But like realizing this is actually like a pretty good first step to also finding out what is special about you. Because a few of us are like truly able to individualize and flesh out a deeper meaning of these otherwise like very average life experiences. And if you are able to, then I believe that would make like a very strong personal story. Next slide. So these next 2 prompts are like what I like to call a moment of defeat and a moment of growth. And I think that these 2 prompts like are very similar to each other. There's just like very detailed differences, but you can look at them together, because you should always be looking at a weakness while also looking at a strength. Your greatest weakness should reveal your greatest strength, and vice versa. So for these 2 prompts, you just really want to be like humble, self-aware, and very self-reflective. And how I like to look at it is that like it asks you about remembering a time that you faced this challenge, or like the time of this realization, accomplishment, or event. And that's kind of like the beginning of your essay. And then the very end of your essay is kind of like the result of it, what you learn from it, the growth from it. But you can also really flesh out the middle, because it's asking you about like a moment of growth, but like growing pains. Growth is good, but like oftentimes it hurts and it's hard. And so to actually be able to like talk about that process can be worthwhile. And so just ask yourself, like, what did you grow from? And most and more importantly, what will you do with this growth? Going back to like the inverse funnel, like you want to relate it to the world. How will you as an individual affect the world with what you learned? Next slide. And then the next 2 prompts I'm going to talk about are what I'm going to group into like the philosophical prompts. So this is prompt 3 and prompt 4. And the philosophical prompts are basically for you if you think there's been a realization or a personal value that is very unique to you and shows that you have like a very mature thought process that is beyond the average one of a 17-year-old, and approach to understanding the world. So you want to show that even before you enter college, there are components to your identity that are very solid and slide. So these are the 2 prompts, prompt 3 and prompt 4. So for these, it says my internet is unstable. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, you're
okay. Sorry. Okay. Just let me know if you can't. So for these 2, it's important to talk about like the time or the problem. So it's like the moment and the outcome, and talking about the moment is just as important as the outcome. So for these 2 prompts, it's really important to choose a very like unique moment or time or like problem. And it's kind of like this moment of realization where you find out that like some way that you think is different from the general population, and you want to show this like moment of individuality forming. So you want to explore all the different types of problems that you can be writing about. So this can be a very literal problem, like I want to cure cancer, or it can be like a very like philosophical or theoretical, like what is good or bad, Does all life carry the same value? It can really be like anything. And you want to find the problem from the perspective of the answer. So think about what the answers you want are from this world, and that will lead you to the problem that you want to ask. And ask yourself, what are you going to do with this answer when you find it? And keep in mind that like this can definitely be cliche. There really are only so many philosophical prompts that exist in this world. Um, so it's really all about the analysis. Try to make connections between all different elements of life. Be a worldly soul. An example of something that I wrote about is like connecting, like looking at the waves of the ocean and how it like goes up and down. And I was like, that looks like the human wounds and how humans are alive, but water isn't. The water makes life. Things like that. Yeah. Next slide. And this last one is what I would categorize into intellectual. Oh, next slide. This last one is what I would categorize into intellectual vitality. And this is what everyone talks about when you hear about the Stanford prompts. Basically, what intellectual vitality is to show that you like have this love for learning or like this love for curiosity. So that's prompt 6. All you want to do is really show that you have like this very pure, wholesome love for learning. So answer the question of like, why does this topic captivate you? It could be like a moment or experience that you've had. Maybe like your grandparent suffered from this one disease and you watch that happen, so that's why you want to cure it. It could be like the potentials of this subject, like AI is a very new subject to study right now, but it can really like change the world in the future. So you might just be very fascinated by this potential of it. Be really like out of the box with it. Also ask yourself to like, what do you turn to when you want to learn more? Like it might be a person, it might just be like a method, like how do you learn? What is it that you really like learn from? And where do you look to spark wonder or find inspiration? And definitely connect this with your intentions with life and how you want to use this to change the world. Next slide.
And now we'll be talking about supplements.
Oh, wait. Oh, sorry, Chloe. I like edited it a bit, but it like didn't show. There's actually one more prompt. It's prompt 7, and this one is the wild card. It's basically where you can share like any topic or essay of your choice. It can be one that you've like already written and you turn in for a class, or you can just like make your own prompt and you can respond to it. This is for one where it's like you think you have a really powerful personal story, but you don't really necessarily want to shove it into a prompt. You think it's like best on its own, and you can submit that for prompt 7. Yeah.
Okay. And now we'll talk about supplements. So besides the 4 prompts that you have to choose from UC, or the one Common App essay that you have to choose for Common App, each college might ask you a specific question that they want to learn more about you. And I'm going to talk about specifically music because I submitted. It's important to know that not all colleges accept supplements. I think all of the Ivy Leagues take music and art portfolio supplements. I submitted music supplements to USC, Baylor, and some other colleges, I forgot. But story time. So on the left, you see deadline, and it has a question mark above it, right? Okay, so I was going to apply to Carnegie Mellon, which is Emily's school, because I was very interested in a program called BSX. So for BSX, you can double major, and it's a very, very, very cool, incredible pathway. You can double major in the Bachelor of Science. So I could pursue pre-med, and you can also major in an arts because I wanted to pursue piano performance. And that was the only program that I found from like my hours of searching that combined piano and pre-med, which was 2 things I wanted to do. And I was so excited. I was like, okay, I'm gonna apply to this. I'm gonna send in my repertoire, okay? And then I looked at the deadline and it said, oh, it's due January 1st or February 1st. I'm like, okay, it was December 20th, okay? And I remember I was calling Emily, I was talking about this. And then I realized that the arts deadline and the fine arts deadline were both 2 different things. So when you're looking at these deadlines, know that fine arts is music and art is not music. The art deadlines are usually due later. but the music deadlines are around December 1st because they need more time to listen to this. And it's due December 1st, and this is along with your Common App. So you need to finish your Common App essay a month in advance from the usual deadline. Oh, one thing that I forgot to mention is don't submit. I'm going to say this very nicely. Don't submit a music supplement even if you've practiced piano or flute or whatever the heck for 10 years. Like if your parents or like the people at your church go like, oh my gosh, you're so good, you can play for Elise, don't submit it, because unless you're conservatory, I'm going to say this again, unless you're conservatory proficient, unless you've dedicated a lot of time into this and you think that this will be a positive impact in your application, don't submit it. Because usually what happens, and this is what I've heard from college counselors and from my music professors, if you show in your extracurriculars that you won first place in an international competition, that's beautiful, that's awesome, like I'm really proud of you. But if you play and the music department doesn't like your music, because music is very, very subjective, then that's either a neutral impact or a negative impact to your application. So just be very careful when you submit it. And I'm gonna go over repertoire really quickly. This might not make sense unless you play music, but the pieces may overlap. So I was really overwhelmed by the number of pieces that I had to do, but I figured out that they usually overlap in these 4 categories. Traditionally, they'll ask you for 4 types of music. You'll have a Baroque piece, usually a Bach Prelude and Fugue, then a Beethoven/Mozart sonata. It's either one movement or a full sonata. You have to make sure on which one you're doing. Then it's going to ask for an etude. Traditionally use Chopin or Liszt, and then the extra piece will be a romantic or showy contemporary piece. But then there's colleges that are more low key. I think Harvard asked for only 2, so it's asking for a classical/Baroque piece or a romantic and contemporary piece. Make sure you pace yourself, and song quality is very important. I recommend it's called a Shure mic, SHURE. You should buy that if you want to record. And also, something that I didn't know before I started my music repertoire was that you need a letter of recommendation from your music instructor. It can be from your private lesson teacher or your band teacher, just somebody who is involved in your music journey. And they need to actually write about how you have grown as their student. And you also need a biography of your teacher. So their prestige, the awards they've won, where they've performed, things like that. And I can't talk about art, so Emily's going to talk about art.
Wait, Nava, did you want to add something?
Yeah, actually I did. What Chloe was saying kind of reminded me about something that I experienced for Stanford. One of my essays was about music, and I found out that you could actually send in a piece for them to listen to, and I thought that that would definitely add to my application, which in some ways definitely makes sense. But I just want to emphasize that you should definitely do your research before you go into these things for the reasons that Chloe said, and also because they didn't even accept the instrument that I wanted to submit. So like I got all rowdied up and like excited for this, and they didn't even accept my instrument because it's like not like common. So yeah, just do your research. I want to emphasize that part.
That's true. I think you're
Sorry,
muted.
I was muted. So for art supplements, art is definitely more subjective than music is. So there's not really like a term like conservatory proficient that like qualifies whether or not you should submit an art portfolio. Generally, like you know if this is you. So I'll just say that like the 3 things you should be looking into. First is going to be organization. So I personally organized it from technical to conceptual. So that I'm capable of like art beginning, and then at the very end it's like my own thoughts and my like kind of artistic identity. I organized it from best to worst to second best in the first for both the first technical half and the second conceptual half. You can be thinking about unifying factors such as color and content, and your entire portfolio as a whole can also tell a story. So for example, in mine, it went like full circle because the first piece was like a really technical self-portrait, and the last piece was like this really conceptual like magazine kind of self-portrait. For balance, it depends on the school, so really just like research it and see what they want from you. But but if they don't really give you guidelines, I would say to have like half technical and half conceptual, with a few process pictures in the middle if you want to have that, which is like sketchbook pieces and stuff like that. And then your art portfolio will likely be submitted on a slide room, and you can be giving descriptions based off of character count. They actually give you quite a few characters. I would say to definitely take advantage of this. It can only really boost your work, and being able to talk about your art is really just as important as being able to make it. Next slide. So like this is an example of one of the portfolios that I submitted. This one, like the first image is like this, it's supposed to be like of my neighborhood or like the home that I grew up in. And the second one is like a super technical self-portrait. And then the last one is like this magazine that I'm talking about. So I kind of like brought it all together in a story. And the first row is like definitely more technical, and the last row is definitely just all conceptual. Next.
And then the other essays is why the school. So I wrote this for New York. You wanted to talk about, like, if you've been there before, talk about something that you saw on campus that struck you. Talk about how you can contribute back to the school community and what you think that the school community can also do for you.
Yeah, so these other essays are like, for these supplements, you can be expanding on your specific interests, your extracurriculars, or just like take them to like flex, which is like pretty contrasting with what you wrote about in your Common App. So another popular one that you would get is like, why this major? And for answering the why this major prompt, I would say that you can talk about like something that is kind of unexpected of you. So for example, like a lot of computer science kids also could like connect it with an interest in music. You can talk about like your interests, like how you want to study art, but because you're passionate about politics. And then the last one is going to be like really popular supplement is like the one that asks you to further highlight something that hasn't previously been mentioned in your application. So you can just write about like an extracurricular that you don't think like the Common App word count kind of gave, or character count gave it justice enough to. Or you can also just use this moment similar to the why major one, write about something that's like kind of unexpected of you, and that like really does add to your whole like identity. And that's it for the supplements.
So now we're gonna, go ahead, Angela.
So we're gonna have our Q&A session now. If any of you have questions, feel free to ask them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and say them out loud, and we'll do our best to answer. The questions can also be related to anything that's college related, not just about college essays or about application portals.
We're here to answer. Don't be shy.
Yeah, don't be afraid to message them, like, honestly.
And if you don't want to ask to like everybody in the chat, you can also privately message Anne.
I think there's a question.
Okay, we have a question. Do any of you have recommendations as to what to do to strengthen our apps at home right now? Does anybody want to take this question?
I can answer this. So kind of we're getting into that beginning part, like you're making your first accounts for all of these application portals, you're brainstorming, you're thinking, oh my gosh, like I've lived life for 17 years, how do I make my life into an essay? Something that really helped me when I was starting to kind of get the strongest essay I could when it came down to actually submitting them was I would just sit down in a comfortable location, laptop, maybe some music in if that helps you. And I just wrote. I didn't care about grammar. I didn't care about making sure like syntax was proper, spelling doesn't matter. And the most important thing was not going back to read what I had already written. I just kept going and spitting everything out onto my Google Doc. And then in the end, I had something really long and I was able to cut it down and make a stronger essay. And kind of, I wrote this about many different topics. I mean, I feel like everybody who has spoken today has already mentioned like different types of essays that we have written. There are some essays you will never even send to a college, but yeah, there's going to be a lot of different topics you can write about. So I highly recommend, if anything ever pops into your brain, just take your time of day. It's actually kind of fun. Just spit everything out. And then in the end, you'll be able to pick which essay you wrote that resonates the most with you, and then designate your time to strengthen that as much as you can through the months. And because we're in quarantine, something good about this is you have a lot more time on your hands to actually do this. And you have a lot of time, especially with everything going on in the world right now, to reflect and think about your importance. So yeah, I highly recommend doing that. If anybody else wants to add, that would be cool.
Okay, we can move on to the next question then. Someone asked, how many essay drafts did you guys go through until your writing was finalized?
Too many.
A lot, yeah. I think like for me personally, I think the most is like 14 drafts.
What?
Oh my
Yeah.
god.
I did like 20. What the heck? Specifically for me, my Common App essay, I wrote it, I think, the beginning of summer. So the beginning of the summer before senior year, I wrote like a completed Common App. And then I think a month before Common App was due, I completely scrapped it and I changed it because I believed that there was something more important. So many essay drafts, and also work with your friends. They're like really, really good resources. They can work with your honest friends. They can like read it and tell you what's up with it. Like Emily destroyed all my essays, and I finally ended up with like really good essays because of her honesty.
I think that it's like not so much how many drafts you, or for me, it wasn't so much how many drafts I made as it was like how many whole essays I made. Like I would answer like for ComApp, I think I wrote like 2 or 3 for every prompt until I like just had an essay that I actually like really liked. So yeah, I think like it's like something personal. Like you'll know when you're happy with an essay and when it's like good and done. Like
Something
you're still
another
asking and
thing.
yeah.
Sorry. Nava, go
You
ahead.
can
I
go.
was just gonna say something else I recommend is don't yes, scrap your essays and write a new one, but don't scrap them. You know what I mean? Don't just delete them. Keep them in your Google Drive folder. You're gonna go back and look at them. I'm not attacking you or anything, but for me, when I wrote my essays, I found it really useful to go back and be like, what was this aspect? What was this element that I included here that made this one so strong? And then added it to my other essay. There's a lot of copying and pasting that's gonna go on. So yeah.
Right. Definitely
Yeah,
copy and pasting.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing as Nava. Keep all of your drafts on a doc just to refer back to them if you need to. So don't like delete anything or just have them there because you might want to refer back to them.
Okay, the next question is, what's the difference between activities and extracurriculars?
Wait, I think Anne wanted to add something to that the previous.
Oh, for sure. Go
I'm
ahead.
so sorry. I actually had a question to ask after, but just to add on briefly, like when you guys write your essays, don't care about the word limit. Like just write as much as you guys want, and then you guys can just delete as you guys go. And honestly, I think a lot of sorry, you guys. The 2020toyou members would be willing to edit your essay. So if you guys want, you guys could reach out to us and we would be like willing to give back our feedback. So yeah, and then Angela can ask her question again.
The question was, what's the difference between activities and extracurriculars?
I think Emily said something about that, right?
Right. I don't really know if this is like what the question was asking, but on Common App, like you separate
Emily, you're lagging a little.
and then you get a separate section for like activity/extracurriculars. And then on UC, it's all like in one pool. So it's not like you can only write, like there's 5 spaces for activities, 5 spaces for jobs, 5 spaces for awards. You basically decide of like everything you've ever done before and all the awards you've ever won, all the jobs you've ever worked, all the volunteer experience, you put it into one. So I don't think you really have to worry about that then, if that was like what the question meant.
Okay. The next question is, can you please give an example on writing out of the box topics?
I think
Emily?
Chloe can.
Okay, let's see. Um,
Tell them about the road.
okay, for U Michigan, there was this prompt that I mean, Chloe kind of talked about. It was like this prompt that like we all belong to a community, whether this is like a physical community, whether it's like geographical or it's like race, or it's like a religious belief or something. And the community that I decided to write about was this Facebook group called like screw this Michigan destroying map and everyone who keeps posting it. And it's basically like this group of people who are super interested in geography. And like a lot of American maps just distort the state of Michigan on like on their maps. So I wrote about how I belong to that group. So I think like the way to answer an out like a prompt out of boxly is to take like the noun that they're asking for and just come up with something interesting. So the noun that this prompt was asking for was a community. In Common App, there's like this one prompt that asks like identify a problem that you would like to solve. So you can think about like an out of the box problem, and that would like make your entire essay more interesting, I think. That's like one way to approach it, I guess. I totally made that up on the spot, so.
One of the prompts asked me, what do you do in your free time? What do you listen to? What do you read? And I talked about button poetry because I love poetry slams. And I talked about how when I heard people at poetry slams, when I heard them speaking, I imagined it was like arrows and it was splashes of color. So I talked about how when they spoke, I saw color in the air. And another one that I talked about, which is like not really out of the box, but I wrote about this. But almost everybody except for I think Emily told me not to write this. For one of my UC apps, I wrote about a surprise party that I planned for my parents, and it was one of my leadership ones because I had to deal with their friends, and it was like really annoying. But I wrote about that because I knew it wasn't something that other people would write about, but it was something that was important to me.
Just so you guys don't get too stressed out, I didn't write any essays like that, and I'm fine. Like I'm going to Davis and I'm studying a major that I really want to study, and it's a great program. And I had a really hard time coming up with these creative things. The creative essays that I wrote ended up being complete trash, and I just ended up writing pretty generic essays. So if you're stressed out, don't worry, you're fine.
Yeah, you definitely don't have to be like super creative. Like I think like bad humor is just one of my personality traits, so that's just like shown.
Okay, we can move on to the next question then. How important are extracurriculars compared to the rest of your college application?
Compared to what?
The rest of the college application.
Yeah.
I think that there's no way to weight everything. Everybody answers this question differently. Like, what's the most important thing when it comes to college applications? Some people will say that your GPA is the most important. Some people say your essays. I genuinely think that they're all like equally important, because if you're focusing your time just on making like your GPA great, your extracurriculars aren't going to be as strong in your essays. Like you won't have time to like write solid essays and stuff. It's like you don't want to distract from each aspect. Try and disperse your time equally to make sure that you are making yourself the strongest applicant you can be, if that makes sense.
I can speak
Yeah,
from personal experience related to this. Personally, I feel like I could have done better in terms of like GPA and SAT and ACT, especially compared to peers who are doing engineering and stuff. But I feel like suppose you have like a bit lower of a GPA or SAT or ACT, if you have really good extracurriculars, it does help. It kind of does help fill the gap. And I'd say out of state schools actually really look at extracurriculars because I know a lot of people who had a bit higher stats than me who didn't get in the first round and stuff like that. Um, but UCs, I'd say UCs are more dependent on grades and stuff, although they do take into account extracurriculars. So it really depends. Like no two schools are the same, and also there's no like right way to answer that question just because like no one actually like answers that question because colleges don't tell you how much like each thing is weighed.
I want to mention that. Sorry, go.
Oh, I was gonna just add on that like I think that whatever school accepts you, like like whatever school takes you thinks you will do good at that school. For example, like I had like pretty bad grades throughout all of high school. I probably would have if I went to a school similar to Irvington, with like classes that were similar, and like I probably would have kept having bad grades. So like if a school accepts you, be if you had really strong grades and like you kind of know that like you're like that's kind of your forte, like it's probably because that school thinks that that school is also probably structured like the same way. um so like don't feel down, I guess, if like you don't get into a certain school because they just like they're literally just not going to be a good fit for you probably. Also to kind of bring it back to the question, in terms of like writing college essays, like your extracurriculars are only as valuable as like what you actually do with them. So in the Common App, it's just like you write the title and then you get like 50 characters to like explain what it means. But if you're like really able to flesh it out in your essays, that's going to give it a lot more meaning. Personally, for me, like in my essays, I don't think I really mentioned the title or position that I had in any of the extracurriculars I did. I just wrote about like what I did and like the impact it made. So I guess that speaks to how much like extracurriculars matter then.
Just one more thing to reiterate, you can't even write about extracurriculars for CSUs. Like there's no option to, so they just look at GPA. And for class of 2021 and all classes after 2025, they're taking away standardized testing for UC system. So I think that it's going to shift towards extracurriculars and GPA.
To move on to the next question, someone privately asked me, for the UC college essays, should we choose essays from all essay categories such as leadership, uniqueness, or challenges, or should we just focus on one category?
Okay, I'm gonna take that because I think I said this. From a lot of, okay, remember that our advice is what worked for us, and it's not like a template for everybody. So admissions is very subjective, but I'm just going to share with what I've learned through my experience. What I've learned is that through almost everybody that I've talked to, well-roundedness is very important, but commitment is also important. So I divided it into 3 different categories. It was challenges, leadership, and uniqueness. You have 4 essays. So why would you write about 4 essays for a specific topic? You could do 1 essay in each of the topics and then again, write the additional 4th one to showcase something that you're very strong in. But then again, if your leadership is like super strong, like Nava here, our ASG president, then you could talk about leadership. You could talk about leadership for as much as you want. There is no template. It's just the advice that we're sharing.
Yeah, I think that like naturally, you'll just find that you would be like writing one about leadership, one about creativity, etc. Just because those prompts are like the backbone to it, the story, like the examples from your life that you're going to use are going to be like very similar for the leadership ones. So you might find that if you're writing 2 essays both about leadership, that you might be talking about like kind of similar ideas, I guess. It's kind of just finding the right question to fit it into by that point.
I also mentioned this earlier. UCs are known to be a little bit more harsh when it comes to academics, and they emphasize on that a little bit more from like what people have observed in the past. And a lot of the essays, when you're going over the prompts in your own time, you'll notice that a lot of the prompts reference academics or like academically. That's going to be a word present in pretty much like a lot of the essay prompts. And I urge you to try and answer one of the questions related to academics in the best way that you can. For me, that was really tough because I don't really focus a lot of my time on academics compared to like, okay, if we're talking about like the general community we have at Irvington High, I'm not the most academically focused person compared to like everyone around us. So that was a little tough for me, but they're like, I'm rambling. But my point is try and write an essay about academics and that challenges that you've like overcome and stuff, because they focus on that a little bit, if that makes sense.
To move on, so someone else asked me, are there any impacts if you apply to a college with an undecided major, and how easy is it to change your major in college?
That's kind of depending on each
on their
school.
college. Yeah.
Yeah, like when I ended up having to decide between which schools I was going to end up committing to, something that I did was I applied to each school kind of with a different major because I don't know what I want to do with the rest of my life, and there's nothing wrong with that. So, something important for me was like how easy it is to change between majors, or like which schools provide interdisciplinary majors and interdisciplinary programs for you to be able to explore your options the best that you can. So that really depends on each school. Like I know for UW, based on their system, it was really difficult, and I would not have been able to change into the major that I wanted to go to. So that's the reason why I couldn't end up going to that school. So can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, sorry. The question was, are there any impacts if you apply to a college with an undecided major, and how easy is it to change your major in college?
Yeah, so I was just addressing that second part of the question. Undecided is also different for each school, I believe, if anybody else wants to touch on that part.
I think well, if the major is impacted, then it might be harder to switch into if you go in as undecided. And another thing to keep in mind is if you're applying to any engineering major or to the engineering school, then it's going to be hard if you get into the College of Letters and Science and you want to switch to an engineering major for most UCs. And I think it's easier in private colleges, but for most colleges, it's going to be harder for moving from a humanities or life science major into an engineering major because they're part of different colleges within the university.
Yeah, I could say that like when you're applying to college, a lot of people either apply for the major or you apply for the college. So like an example of this would be like, like a less prestigious college that nobody's really heard of, but the specific major that you want to do there is like the best college in the nation for that major. So that's like an example of applying to college for a major. Otherwise, but like applying to college for the college, like for UCLA, they don't like it doesn't matter what major you apply to in letters of science, you're considered on the same for like everyone else. So in that case, you're more applying to the college. And how hard or how difficult applying to that college for that major also kind of reveals how easy it would be to change majors, I guess. So for UCLA, it would probably be like pretty simple to change majors in letters and science, just because when you were applying, it didn't really matter. So I don't think I think if you were like undecided for a college like that, it wouldn't be that like it wouldn't affect your app chances that much. I also know that like Carnegie Mellon, if you applied undecided, I think it like made you write an essay about why you were applying undecided. But generally, I don't think it really doesn't hurt you that much. Like if the college has an undecided major, there's a reason why they have that major to start with.
I had one last question. Sorry. How did you find internships and how important are they?
Oh, actually, you should. I'm just gonna throw her name out there. Her name is Shakuntala, and she found research opportunities in USF, in Stanford, and in Berkeley. She's attending Berkeley now, and she's talked about it to me once, and she's like incredible in it. And I just wanted to throw out there that again, I'm pursuing pre-med, but I didn't have any medical internships before this, so internships were positive to her application, but no internships weren't detrimental to my application. So again, it's very subjective.
Yeah, adding on to what Chloe said, generally internships are like a college level thing. Like to be honest, if you compare yourself with people around the nation, and like a lot of people at my school who I've talked to, they haven't done internships yet. So most people don't do internships before college, except for the fact that we live in Bay Area where everyone's super competitive. So if you do internships, it's only positive to your application, but if you don't, it won't really be detrimental to your application.
So I can personally talk about like lab internships. I had one last summer at Stanford. So the best way to get a lab internship is to just send a bunch of emails out. I think I send around like 200 emails to different professors at different universities, and make sure when you're emailing the professors that your email is specific to their lab, and talk about why you want to specifically research in their lab and what interests you about their lab. And this year it's going to be hard because of COVID-19, so don't stress too much. Like everyone else has been saying, it's not really important. And if you have it, it adds to your application, but it's not going to be a negative if you don't.
For the sake of time, I'm going to end it there. I want to thank everybody for coming. Lauren, and do you guys have anything to add?
Well, if you guys know any other people who may be interested in these college meetings, we still have one every day after this, as well as a repeat of this presentation tonight from 8 to 9. And if you're also wondering whether you can access the presentation slides as well as recordings, we'll make sure to post them in our Facebook group. So if you're not in that group yet, just request to join and you'll be able to access them. And
if you have any more questions, you can PM anybody here. Yeah. Thanks guys for coming. Bye-bye.
Thank you.